Welcome back to the Sportsbook Draft, where FanDuel's pick is in.
With the first pick in the 2025 Sportsbook Draft, FanDuel selects the Kentucky Derby.
Brilliant pick, as FanDuel becomes the first sportsbook app where you can bet the Derby.
Just a savvy move by a savvy franchise. New customers get a no-sweat first bet on the Kentucky Derby up to $500.
It's like they know each other.
What do you think Rob's saying to him right now?
Probably something about oats.
Hi, everyone. Glad you've joined the Daily Racing Form Kentucky Derby webinar. I'm Brad Free and glad to be joined by two handicappers, horse players, Andy Beyer and Steve Crist. Andy Beyer, handicapping author, expert. His Beyer speed figures are published exclusively in Daily Racing Form. And Steve Crist, turf writer, author, racing executive, columnist, and former publisher of Daily Racing Form. Good afternoon, guys, and thanks for taking time to talk Derby.
Well, we're ready.
Okay, we've got a lot of topics to discuss among the 21 horses entered in this year's Kentucky Derby. But first, this webinar is presented by FanDuel, and FanDuel has a pretty good deal for this year's Kentucky Derby. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $500. If your bet misses, you get your full money back. That's a pretty good deal. A no-risk wager up to $500. Check it out at FanDuel.com. Well, our webinar topics today will include the Derby pace scenario, Derby handicapping nuance. We're going to go horse by horse through virtually the entire field, give our selections toward the end, and take some questions in our Q&A segment. Let's take a look at the entire field of 21 that are entered in the Kentucky Derby. There is one also eligible. That's number 21, Baeza. Guys, the last time that we did a webinar for Daily Racing Form, it was the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar. Steve made a case for a long shot in the Filly Mare Sprint. Soul of an Angel rallied from last and paid $41.60. Andy made a case for Breeders' Cup Mile long shot More Than Looks. He rallied from last to win the Breeders' Cup Mile at $15.80. I bring up those two examples for two reasons. First of all, to brag on you guys. Secondly, as a transition to the topic of Kentucky Derby pace. Soul of an Angel and More Than Looks both rallied from last in the Breeders' Cup. This year's Kentucky Derby field appears to be loaded with speed. Andy, let's start with you. Before we go through and talk about the individual runners in this field, how do you see the pace scenario, not only this year, but from a historical perspective, and how does that influence your analysis of the race?
Well, since I knew we were going to be talking about pace, I went to the history books, and when I became a racing fan many years ago, I mean, the Derby was best noted, for being a race that was so often won by big dramatic closers. Horses like Whirl Away, Carry Back, Secretariat, came from far behind, made big late charges, and really became part of Kentucky Derby lore. One of the reasons that horses with this style did so well in those days, looking back, was that sprinters were free to enter the Derby. And if you had, one or two quick horses, going a half and 46, it would, maybe usually set the race up for somebody coming from behind. And the quintessential example of this was in 1986, one of the greatest sprinters we have ever seen was the colt Groovy, who was, in today's Beyer speed figures, he was probably running numbers of 130. He was that good, but the owner wanted to see him go 1.25 miles, and in that race, he blasted off, ran 6 furlongs and 1:10, then totally ran out of gas, lost by 50 lengths. All the horses chasing him faltered, and Ferdinand rallied from 16th place to win the race, and that was the best example of the way a real fast-paced sprinter can can affect the the whole Derby. Well, Churchill Downs realized that this was an issue for the Derby, and that 13 years ago they decided to change the pathway into the race with the current point system, which meant that horses had to prove themselves in prep races over a mile, at a mile or longer, and the races just became truer. And if you disregard the data from the era of Whirl Away and others, and look at the Derby from the last 12 runnings, you get a kind of a different impression of this race. In those 12 runnings under the point system, there have been like only 3 deep closers who have won. There were 3 first-time starters and 5 horses who were stalking the speed within 2 lengths of the lead. Based on that, you would say that the Derby has become a race that marginally favors speed horses, not deep closers. And and I think a lot of players are a little scared to be betting speed, just as you showed on this video a couple minutes ago, Brad. All of the speed horses who were in this Derby field, but in light of the recent history of the Derby, I'm not reacting to say, gee, there's just so much speed, it's got to set up for a closer. I think we have to have the idea that the Derby, unique race that it is, tends to favor speed horses now. Maybe I'm crazy, but I'm sticking to that premise.
Well, looking at that list of 7 green circles, Citizen Bull, Neo Equos, Rodriguez, American Promise, American Daytona, East Avenue, and Owen Almighty, I see a pace duel unfolding among a handful of horses. Maybe American Daytona is not a true speed horse, but he did win the UAE Derby gate to wire. I have a hard time envisioning any of those 7 green circles winning the Kentucky Derby after putting away their fellow pace rivals. Maybe I'm in the minority. Steve, what's your take on the pace scenario of this year's Kentucky Derby and how it may have influenced your handicapping?
Well, I think you need to, distinguish between speed horses who don't belong in the race and, good horses who happen to, be forwardly placed speed horses. I mean, you don't have to worry about, Owen Almighty or Neo Equos actually winning the Kentucky Derby. I mean, they're going to be done after a mile and retreat thereafter. But a horse like Rodriguez, I don't think he has to gun. And I think given that, both he and Citizen Bull are trained by Bob Baffert, and Citizen Bull absolutely has to go from the rail, and Baffert has said as much, I don't think he's going to send Rodriguez, after him to go head and head 22:45. So, just because a horse has ones in his PPs doesn't mean he's going to be part of a 7-way duel.
Steve, I'm glad you brought up Rodriguez as a potential upsetter. I understand that his best 2 races were when he made the lead. I think he has the potential to maybe settle just off the pace and get a great trip. If he can be as effective from that position remains to be seen, but I can see him as a potential upsetter. Andy, the last time the Kentucky Derby was won by the pace setter was in 2021. Your top selection, Medina Spirit, won and paid $26.20. How do you get past the idea with all those green circles of forwardly placed horses? How do you resolve that with the idea that this Kentucky Derby does not necessarily have to be won by a deep closer?
I don't know. I would look at this lineup and say that there are 3 quality horses with speed in this field. Citizen Bull, Rodriguez, and East Avenue. I'm not going to lose sleep about worrying about how Neo Equos is going to affect the dynamics of this race, and the fact that Citizen Bull and Rodriguez are both from the Baffert bar, and they're certainly not going to go dual. So I don't see this as despite all your green circles, as any more a speed-ridden race than we usually have in the Derby. There are always speed horses in the race, but I don't think that's going to be the pace is necessarily going to be the defining factor here.
All right, it's a factor, for no question about that. Beyond the pace scenario, I want to ask both you guys if there are any nuances that might apply to the Kentucky Derby. Condition, class, pace, speed, and connections to me are still the basic fundamentals of handicapping. They apply in every race. But Steve, are there factors that might apply to a large field of 3-year-olds going 1 1/4 miles in May that might not apply to a regular any other stakes race?
Well, obviously the distance, which nobody has attempted. This is an unusual race, in all of American racing, in that nobody's proven at the distance. So that's everyone's big concern. Again, I think that rather than just going, who's a 1 1/4 mile horse as opposed to a speed horse, to look at it instead of who are the quality horses and who are not. My kind of, global take on this Derby, I like 2 of the 5 big preps, and I don't like the other 3. So that's sort of the line that I'm drawing. And it's a line that's backed up by the figures, because those are the 2 races, the Santa Anita Derby and the Wood, that got triple-digit buyers for their winners. And I think that other horses, the runners-up in both of those races also ran very well. So, I'm going, those are my 2 preps that I like. I'm taking the 4 horses out of those 2 preps.
Andy, same question to you. Does the Kentucky Derby present any unique handicapping challenges, or in your opinion, is it just the same as any other stakes race?
No, well, there's always been one factor in the Derby that may have, maybe less important today than it was in the past, but I still pay attention to the issue of who has got the foundation and the bottom, and the experience, to be effective in the Derby. That horses, we always used to laugh about the curse of Apollo, that for so many years, no horse who had failed to race at 2 had won the Derby, since Apollo in 18 something. That's not a relevant factor either. But basically, horses need the adequate preparation, to be ready for the stress of a 1 1/4 mile race with 20 horses in the field. And so when I see, I have a horse like Grand or Grande, as you might have it, with 3 career starts, or horses who launched their career in January. Ideally, I would like to see a little more experience and toughness from horses I'm betting in the Derby.
Well, experience and seasoning, certainly a couple of attributes. However, that did not slow down Mage in 2023, nor Justify in 2018, horses who won the Kentucky Derby in the 4th start of their career. As for me, I think that, handicapping the Kentucky Derby requires one to filter out a lot of noise. There's a lot of superfluous fluff out there. We're hearing about glowing workout reports for Citizen Bull. Well, Citizen Bull was working fast last August, and he's still working fast now. It's not exactly great, breaking news. Journalism, apparently he looks phenomenal physically this week at Churchill Downs. Anybody who watched him train all winter and spring at Santa Anita would have arrived at the same conclusion. So I think there's a lot of stuff that you just let go in one ear and out the other. What I'm interested in are things that are out of the ordinary as far as workout reports go, new tactics in training, equipment changes, something different beyond just words. Otherwise, I would maintain that condition, class, pace, speed, and connections are the most important factors to handicap the Kentucky Derby, as they are in just about any other race. Okay, we're going to go through the entire field, so let's get to it. And we're going to start off talking about the horse that everyone believes to be the favorite. I do too, and that is Journalism. Andy, Journalism is the fastest horse in the field on figures. He earned a 102 in the Santa Anita Derby, a 108 in the San Felipe. Is his speed figure advantage enough to carry him to victory this Saturday?
Well, I just think it reflects the fact that he's, the best and most accomplished horse in the field. He ran that 108 2 races ago. I mean, that's considering that nobody has run a figure of 108 in the Kentucky Derby since Big Brown. That's that's a pretty impressive credential. So I think he is as solid a favorite as we've seen in some time. I mean, I've always been, I'm always skeptical of favorites in the Derby, but I just I don't have a knock on him. And as he ran the 108, and when he came back the next time, he had enough trouble in his last start that I'll give him another 3 points. I'll call him 108 and 105. But I mean, that's enough to beat this group.
Well, it makes him the top figure horse in the field based on either of his last 2 starts. So 108 followed by a 102 with an asterisk, because he did overcome significant trouble. Journalism did, winning the Santa Anita Derby. Steve, you mentioned earlier that the Santa Anita Derby and the Wood Memorial, in your opinion, 2 of the best Derby prep races. What about Journalism's trip in the Santa Anita Derby, his resulting 102 speed figure, and his chances to win at Churchill Downs this weekend?
Like Andy, I have no knock on this horse whatsoever. In addition to maybe being the fastest horse in the field and one of the most accomplished, you have to like his tractability and versatility. However the race unfolds, I think he can adapt to it. He can be close to a slow pace or wait if they do get very stupid up front. Unless something goes wrong, it's hard to imagine this horse is not going to be involved in the finish of the race.
Well, something almost did go wrong in the Santa Anita Derby, because jockey Umberto Rispoli found himself in a very bad spot between the half-mile pole and the 3/8 pole. That was in a small field. I'm just curious what type of trip that Rispoli will be able to work out in a field of 20. Many of perhaps don't belong, but at any rate, I think you guys are both right. With a clean trip, Journalism is going to be very difficult to beat this weekend. And since we're talking about speed figures, let's just take a quick look at some of the recent speed figures, highest speed figures going into the Kentucky Derby. And it's a pretty good list. And when you look down this list, and this is using only one handicapping factor, highest last start speed figure. Okay, Fierceness bombed last year. 2 fills 2 years ago. I thought he ran better than the winner. Epicenter, he ran well to finish second. Maximum Security, the highest last start figure in 2019, crossed the wire first. Justify won the race, and then California Chrome. Over the last 10 years, and I did not include the year 2020 when the Derby was run in September, 5 horses with the highest last start speed figure ran exceptionally well in the Kentucky Derby. I know that's not the only factor, but I think it just illustrates the significance of a high figure going into the Kentucky Derby. And that's exactly what journalism has done. You know, a lot of people have talked about, well, journalism has been defeating small fields, which is true. But some of the horses that journalism has defeated, listen to this list. They all happen to be trained by Bob Baffert. Journalism defeated Getaway Car, a graded stakes winner. He defeated Gaming, a grade 1 winner. Barnes, a grade 2 winner. He defeated Rodriguez, a subsequent grade 2 winner. And he defeated Citizen Bull last time out. Journalism, his 4-race win streak has been against some very, very good horses. Let's take a real quick look at the replay of the stretch run of the Santa Anita Derby, just to remind everybody that Journalism is a pretty good horse, and so is the horse that he defeated. Can we roll the tape of that stretch run of the Santa Anita Derby real quick? And you will see Baeza taking the lead into the stretch. Journalism coming up on the outside, getting by. Baeza down on the inside, tried to fight back. He battled back on the inside. He actually galloped out in front of Journalism after the wire. So a couple of very good colts ran 1-2 in the Santa Anita Derby. So let's talk briefly about the horse that Journalism defeated. Right now, as the time that we were recording this webinar, Baeza is still not in the field. He's number 21. But let's talk about Baeza. Andy, if Baeza scratches in, he'll be breaking from the far outside post. He earned a 101 figure last time out. Do you give Baeza a chance if he draws into the Derby?
I'd say he was going to be my exacta horse in this Derby. I mean, I couldn't knock him, and I just thought it was I was just very annoyed that that he didn't draw into the race. I mean, somehow Churchill Downs came up with the idea that horses were going to, lose a percentage of their point total if they were in like a field of 5 or less, and it was just a little. They're just trying to be a little too clever. I mean, and if they thought about it, they'd say, well, where are you apt to get a field of 5 in the Derby preps? Maybe it's Santa Anita, where they've had a lot of small fields, and which also has the best 3-year-olds in the country. And this was just for Baeza to not get in here. And when you look at the horses coming out of the JR Stakes race on synthetic at Turfway Park, to keep him out. I mean, it's just a travesty. I mean,
well, let's hope that travesty gets resolved before the 2026 Kentucky Derby, because we'll probably have another small field next spring in the Santa Anita Derby. Steve, let me ask you the same question. If Baeza gets in, you've already talked about how you thought the Santa Anita Derby was a strong race. Would you consider Baeza a top contender if he draws into the field?
Absolutely. It was only his 4th career start, and he ran second, beaten less than a length by the very solid Derby favorite, and he certainly still has ceiling left. So, to me, he's a very, very dangerous horse. And, fortunately for him, for the last, I think, 6 years in a row, there has been a horse come out during Derby week. So you hope that holds up. Otherwise, it is just ridiculous that the runners up in the JR Stakes and the Virginia Derby get into this race ahead of the runner up in the Santa Anita Derby. It's just crazy. To my mind, the rule was put in, purely as an anti-Baffert rule. I mean, as Andy said, where else were you going to get a 5-horse field? Obviously, the Santa Anita Derby. It's a silly rule. I mean, if people had, been more aware of it, it would have been a better race if Bob had put in 3 maidens, so that you'd have an 8-horse field. I mean, what does that accomplish? Why are you incentivizing that? It's just a bad idea, and they should stop trying to punish Bob Baffert.
Well, maybe they will stop by next year.
If Baeza does get in, he's going to have post 20, which is, certainly going to be a little bit of a handicap. Although I guess you could point out if you bet the number 21 horse in the Kentucky Derby, you'd be a winner for the century. So it's not it's not an insuperable obstacle, but it would not help him.
Well, Rich Strike won from the Far Outside Post a couple of years ago. Baeza's price is not going to be anywhere close to the 80 to 1 of Rich Strike. I think Baeza is a serious contender for many of the reasons that you guys pointed out. He's improving race by race by race. He's always been kind of playing catch up to journalism. Journalism has started 5 times, Baeza only 4. Baeza ran a terrific race in the San Antonio Derby, and I'm not saying he was best, but he covered a lot more ground than journalism. He also did not get into the same trouble that journalism encountered, but he ran well. Baeza did. He finished a mile clear of 3rd place. He earned another top figure. I think he is a serious contender. If Baeza gets into the field, I can see him starting somewhere in the single-digit territory. There's no way that he's going to be double digits, not with that pattern and that pedigree. By McKenzie is also a half-brother to Mage, Kentucky Derby winner, and Dornoch, Belmont Stakes winner. So journalism, the favorite, Baeza on the also eligible list. Let's turn our attention to the co-second choices in the Kentucky Derby based on the morning line, those being Florida Derby runner-up Sovereignty and Arkansas Derby winner Sandman. Steve, I get some of the appeal with regards to Sovereignty. 2 starts into his campaign. He's trained by Bill Mott. He likes Churchill Downs. But I can't get past the fact that on figures, he's really not that fast yet. What's your take, Steve, on Sovereignty, runner-up in the Florida Derby?
Well, I have the same feeling that you do. And you couple that with the fact that this horse is 5 to 1 on the morning line. And he strikes me as the biggest underlay in the field. I mean, you can't say he can't win. I mean, he's a nice horse and, he's got good connections, on his side. But, why is he 5 to 1 instead of 15 to 1? He's slow. He needs to improve. Florida was not exactly a hotbed of quality in the prep races this year. So to me, he's a horse I would only use very, very defensively, and I don't want him at 5 to 1.
Andy, how about you? What's your take on Sovereignty?
I feel the way Steve does. I really have not thought about him as a real serious contender in here. I mean, he's just another horse. The Florida group was not that good. His figures are not eye popping. I really don't have much to say about him. I know that's a rarity for me.
Well, I mean, his Florida Derby effort, his runner-up finish was just okay behind Tapan Street, has subsequently been sidelined, did not make the Kentucky Derby. I thought it was just okay, but to take a short price on a horse there are 10 other horses in the field that earned a higher last start figure than Sovereignty. He's going to have to take a huge forward move to win the Kentucky Derby. I agree with you guys. Steve, let me ask you about Sandman. He did earn a fairly decent figure last time out in a race that set up perfectly for his closing style. Talk about an old school racehorse, 8 starts already, most of them around 2 turns, or many of them anyway. What about Sandman? Steve, I'll ask you first.
Well, obviously I'm a little intimidated by that high figure, but this is one of the classic setup races of all time. I mean, if you were teaching a course on handicapping and you wanted to explain how pace makes the race, you would use this race. The horse who was dueling for the lead in that race, got a time form pace figure of 147 that I've never seen on a set of past performances before. It was absolutely brutal. So, you're not supposed to take horses at single digit odds who got one of the greatest setups in the history of horse racing last time out. I think he's a little bit of an underlay. All of his races prior to the Arkansas Derby, I mean, you can't find one that makes you think he's a really good horse or a fast horse. So I'm passing on Sandman, but he will be passing horses at the end.
Andy,
Yeah,
what
the
about
track
your take on
announcer had a
Sandman?
great call on that Arkansas Derby. I mean, the two speeds were out there just, beating each other's brains out, and we're 4 or 5 lengths ahead of the field, and he said they can't keep this up, and of course they didn't, and Sandman, plunked along and and beat him. But as you say, he's not going to have the trip of a lifetime, twice in one lifetime.
Well, I guess that all depends on how those green circles line up going into the first turn, because if they go another 45 and 1/2 mile, Sandman might have every chance. I'm kind of with you guys, though. Sovereignty and Sandman, they're good horses. To me, they're not quite fast enough. They need every break to go their way. And you could probably say the same thing about the 2-3 finishers from the Arkansas Derby, those being Publisher and Cole Battle. Publisher is still a maiden. He's getting good, but he kind of was a product of the pace scenario as well. And Cole Battle, I thought Cole Battle ran fairly well considering he was somewhat forwardly placed. Do either one of you guys find any intrigue in Publisher trying to give Steve Asmussen his first Kentucky Derby winner with his 27th Derby starter, or Cole Battle? Anyone like these two horses?
Yeah, I mean, Cole Battle was kind of nothing before his Arkansas Derby, and at least figure wise, and he was within he was within hailing distance of the horses who were battling for the lead, but still, he kind of benefited from their collapse. So I couldn't touch him.
Steve, if you don't like the winner Sandman, I got to believe that you're not really enamored with 2-3 finishers behind him either.
No, I think, Publisher is just a little on the slow side in his other races, and he's just kind of a clunk up horse. Cole Battle's such a cool story. You kind of can't help rooting for him. And he did move too soon in the Arkansas Derby. And so he made what looked like this super impressive middle move as the pace was starting to crack. But even, on his best day, I don't think a 91 is going to win the Kentucky Derby.
Publisher and Cole Battle, a couple long shots that we don't particularly care for. Let's talk about the two shippers coming in for the Kentucky Derby this year. They're both from Japan, Luxor Cafe and Admire Daytona. Japan got close last year. Forever Young, a Japanese horse by way of Dubai, missed by 2 noses. One could argue that maybe he was best. Steve, let me go to you first. Is this the year that a Japan runner or a horse from Dubai can finally win the Kentucky Derby, referring to Luxor Cafe and Admire Daytona?
Well, I defer to Andy in evaluating Japanese form, but these horses don't look to me like Forever Young. I mean, you look at the weak time form rating on the UAE Derby. You look at what limited data we have, and these don't look like the kind of killers they brought over last year to me.
Steve, Andy, what about you? You've been following the Japan emergence on the international scene. Do you respect these two horses?
Ever since the Japanese horses shocked everybody at the 2021 Breeders' Cup, it was the first indication that they had that something had happened in Japan, and their industry has exploded. They've got I think you can argue they've got the best horses in the world now. And, it's all because of a Kentucky Derby winner, Sunday Silence, when he was sold to Japanese interests and went to stud. He transformed the horse population there, and the way that we saw Nasrullah and Bold Ruler, transform American racing in the 50s and 60s. People will look at these two Japanese horses, and I've heard multiple people use this reasoning. I mean, Luxor Cafe, beat Admire Daytona. Admire Daytona comes back, and wins the UAE Derby. So Luxor Cafe must be really good, and both of them are probably pretty formidable. But I agree with Steve. These horses just don't look on paper, like some of the others who've come here. I mean, Admire Daytona, took got beaten 3 straight times in maiden company before winning a maiden race as the 1-10 favorite. And Luxor Cafe's early career was sort of similar to that. Luxor Cafe, won a stake in Japan by 5 lengths, which looks pretty impressive. I mean, the time of the race was 1:52 flat for 1.125 miles. On that card, there was an allowance for older horses for winners of 2 races lifetime that went in 1:51.7. So the time of the Luxor Cafe race wasn't that good. And as for the UAE Derby, my colleague on the Beyer Speed Figures, Randy Moss, always tries to makes a heroic effort trying to make figures for the Dubai races, and he thought that the UAE Derby, got a figure in the 80s, maybe even in the low 80s. So, despite my kind of innate fondness for the Japanese horses, I would say this is not their year.
I agree with you guys. I'm not going to knock Luxor Cafe. His win in the Fukuru Stakes was actually visually impressive. He was wide throughout. He dominated the field. I don't know what was behind him. Here's my challenge, I think, for the Luxor Cafe and Admire Daytona. I believe that the horses, the 3-year-olds in North America, are an above average group. Journalism and Baeza certainly fall into that category. The same with Rodriguez and Grande, 1-2 finishers in the Wood Memorial. If these 2 shippers were coming in and facing a bunch of 3-year-olds that were suspect, I might like them more. But I think they are facing some outstanding North American based 3-year-olds. It's always tough to ship in from overseas into Churchill Downs to win the Kentucky Derby. I think that Luxor Cafe and Admire Daytona are both facing some very good company, the likes of which they have not seen so far. And I agree with you guys. The Admire Daytona's low-rated win in this UAE Derby, if that figure, unofficial figure in the 80s, is accurate, it matches the visual impression. There were 3 horses together on the wire. It was not a strong race. To me, the Japanese horses, same with you guys, it's a pass. Okay, let's talk about a couple of medium odds contenders. Steve, you mentioned earlier that you were impressed with the Bluegrass, won by Burnham Square over East Avenue. Burnham Square is the only gelding in the Kentucky Derby field. He's going to try to become another Mind That Bird or Funny Side, a couple of geldings that won in 2009 and 2003. What about Burnham Square? Why do you like him, or why do you respect his chances to win the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, just to clarify, Brad, I was very unimpressed with the Bluegrass.
Okay.
It's the Wood and the Santa Anita Derby were the races I like. The Bluegrass is a race I really don't like. The entire field of 6 finished within 4 lengths of one another at the wire. The race was low rated, getting a 96, and honestly, it could have been a couple of points slower than that. East Avenue is not winning the Kentucky Derby. Burnham Square was life and death to run him down at a shorter distance. I don't want anyone out of this race.
Andy, what about you? Do you knock the Bluegrass as much as Steve does?
No, I thought it was good. I mean, Burnham Square is my exacta horse in this race. I thought the Bluegrass was. This was a legitimate field. I thought that from the pace standpoint, it was a little ambiguous. I mean, yes, this was a fast pace that advantaged Burnham Square, but by the same token, the horse he beat, East Avenue, is a good horse who was loose on the lead, and Burnham Square, ran him down. I mean, East Avenue, I've always thought highly of. I mean, the second start of his career as a 2-year-old. I mean, he won a Grade 1 stake, with a figure of 95. I mean, he's pretty good, and Burnham Square, the third horse in that field, River Thames, is a Todd Pletcher horse who would be considered a legit Kentucky Derby winner if he were in the field. He had a solid record, good figures. So I mean, I thought overall that was a strong race. And another thing I like about Burnham Square is his trainer, Ian Wilkes. And I will start with I guess what sounds like a negative comment. Most trainers of Derby horses have horses who are precocious. Bob Baffert horses look brilliant who are good, look brilliant by the second start of their career. Ian Wilkes may be the absolute antithesis of that. I mean, when you're at Saratoga looking at maiden races, and there's a first-time starter trained by Ian Wilkes, he's an automatic throwout. I mean, he's like got a 5% win percentage with firsters. He's 6% with second-time starters. He and I don't say this, all that negative, but he just lets horses, develop at their own pace. I mean, I think it was last week, he had a filly named Positano Sunset, who won a stake race at Keeneland. Her first stakes win. It was the 15th start of her career. He just he's willing to wait. And so when I look at at Burnham Square's figures, 83, 86, 90, 91, 96. I can see which way this horse is going, and I think we will really be hearing from him during the 3-year-old campaign this year.
There's no question that Burnham Square is getting better. Every race that he has run has been faster than the start before. I agree with Steve. I was not impressed from a visual perspective by the Bluegrass. A couple of the main contenders in the field just did not show up. Chancer McPatrick and Owen Almighty were both up the track. From a visual perspective, I didn't like it. Andy does like it. Here's a look at the stretch run of the Bluegrass Stakes, in which Burnham Square reels in East Avenue. East Avenue had been out there on some relatively decent fractions. He was sent for his life into the first turn, East Avenue was, and turning for home, it looked like he might finish last or completely get gobbled up. He fought back. Burnham Square had all the momentum on the outside and was up to win by a desperate nose. Personally, I did not think it was a visually impressive race. The figures would suggest otherwise. That's one reason why Andy Beyer believes that Burnham Square is a contender in the Kentucky Derby this weekend.
And Burnham Square was 5 wide around the turn while that Pletcher horse was saving ground, and of course East Avenue was too. So you give him a little extra credit for the 5 path. If he's better than you guys give him credit for.
We will find out on Saturday for sure. Let's turn our attention to a horse coming out of the Wood Memorial. A couple of 20-1 shots we're going to talk about next. Grande and Tistastic, the runner-up in the Wood and the Louisiana Derby winner, Tistastic. Steve, I thought that Grande ran at least as well as Rodriguez in the Wood Memorial. What's your take on lightly raced Grande, who has started all of 3 times?
I like Grande. He's going to be very prominent in, however I play this race. I think 20-1 is a crazy high price, for a horse who's coming out of, one of the 2 best preps, who's making only his 4th career start, and, who just has so much ceiling. Like some of Todd's lightly raced horses, just think even back to last year, the horses that we had with only 3 or 4 career starts, they still had room to get faster. I think Grande does. I liked his race in the Wood, behind a horse who was loose, but not crazy loose, not slow fractions, legitimate fast final figure race. Made a couple of different runs during the race. It's the hardest thing to do is to run down a relaxed, loose leader. I thought he ran well, and I think he can get better.
With a 97 Beyer and only his 3rd career start, you'd have to believe that Grande has upside. Andy, what about you at Grande? And Todd Pletcher doesn't have the greatest record in the Kentucky Derby, 2 for 65.
Well, first of all, my first question about Grande is, how should we pronounce his name?
Grande.
Like in the Rio Grande River.
I'm calling him Grande. I don't, that's one reason why I sit behind a keyboard and not at a microphone.
I'm going to call him Grand.
Okay, Grand.
But Mike Rapoli is the owner who had the horse Fort a year ago and insisted on calling him Forte. As did most of the world. Those of us who are purists about the language would definitely go with Ford, and I'm going with Grant. Anyway,
what do you think about the number 10?
I have 2 knocks on Grand or Grande. One, of course, is Todd Pletcher's horrible record in the Kentucky Derby. He's 2 for 65. And I have a theory about this. In my my many years of covering the Derby, I observed that like one of the strongest scenarios you can have in the Derby is when you've got a really under the radar, capable trainer who gets a good horse and has one good horse. And, you think of, Barclay Tagg with Funny Side, Bud Delp with Spectacular Bid, guys who put all of their energy into managing one horse. Pletcher over the years always has an army of 3-year-olds, and he always seems more concerned about moving, who's going to go to Arkansas, who's going to go to Lexington, he's moving pieces around the chessboard. And, he's a great trainer, but it hasn't worked for him in the Derby. So I'm always going to be wary of him, and I don't like the fact that that Grand/Grande is coming into this race with only 3 career starts. I know that some horses in the modern day, have managed to do that, but I just think it's not enough preparation, to cope with a field like this.
Well, the other 20-1 shot we need to at least address is Tistastic, winner of the Louisiana Derby. Guys, I don't think that the Fairgrounds 3-year-olds this winter, with the exception of Magnitude, who was injured, I don't think the Fairgrounds 3-year-olds were all that great. Do either one of you guys give Tistastic any chance? Andy, what about you and Tistastic?
I would say no.
Okay, that's simple enough. Steve, how about you?
If the race melts down, I guess he could clunk up for third or fourth. But even that's an if.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. If the race melts down, if the pace collapses, anything goes. I'm not sure that it's going to in favor of Tistastic. Okay, we want to talk quickly about, there are 4 low probability 30-1 shots that we want to at least mention, just so that we've mentioned everybody. 2 of them are coming out of the Jeff Ruby, Final Gambit and Flying Mohawk. They are synthetic/turf specialists. I think they're up against it in a 1 1/4 dirt race. Andy, what about the Jeff Ruby 1-2s?
Well, after the Ruby runners have excluded Baeza from the field, I'm rooting for them to have all the worst fortune.
Well, I think they're going to be up against it. When they start getting that dirt kickback in their face, it's going to be a completely different situation. Chunk of Gold and Render Judgment, a pair of 30-1 shots that appear to be too slow. Steve, do either one of these 2 have a chance to even hit the board? Render Judgment, who does not belong in the field, in my opinion, or Chunk of Gold, who's still lightly raced and will be finishing?
No, in a word.
Okay.
And I'm curious, Brad, I know you did a line for this race. I mean, how is Render Judgment, who, was just in a dead heat for last in a 6-horse field at 30-1, he's only going to be 30-1 in the Kentucky Derby? I mean, aren't you supposed to make this horse either 50 or 99?
His odds are going to be considerably higher. I can't take credit or blame for making the line, though. That's up to the Churchill Downs line maker. Daily Racing Forum's line maker, David Aragona, does a terrific job. I think that he also might have laid Render Judgment at 30-1. There seems to be some unspoken rule that 30-1 is the highest price that you can make a horse. So I think that his odds will be considerably higher. I take it that you're not interested in either one of those 2 horses, Render Judgment or Chunk of Gold.
No, I'm not, and I think that's a terrible rule. A morning line is supposed to be predictive, and this idea that you're insulting the horsemen by making their horses more than 30-1, I think is silly. I mean, I'd like to think, Ken McPeak would tell you Render Judgment should be 100-1, and he trains the horse.
I agree. And just to clarify, by the way, David Aragona, Daily Racing Forum's line maker, did make Render Judgment 50-1, and so did he make 50-1 on Neo Equa. So at least Aragona, has the foresight to see that the horse, at least on paper, has no chance, and his odds reflected accordingly. I want to go back real quickly, guys, and just touch briefly on those speed horses that we talked about. Citizen Bull, Neo Equos, Rodriguez, American Promise, and Meyer Daytona, East Avenue, Owen Almighty. Citizen Bull, champion 2-year-old last year, completely misfired last time out. Andy, does last year's champion 2-year-old have a chance to win the Kentucky Derby at age 3?
Well, certainly he has a chance. I mean, he's got there's a pretty impressive set of credentials, but the most recent piece of evidence was the Santa Anita Derby, and you certainly couldn't bet him off of that. I mean, now the post position doesn't concern me. I mean, nothing wrong with being speed on the rail, and that he's going to be. But even knowing that the Churchill is a speed favoring track for the Kentucky Derby, I can't see him in here.
Steve, I know that you liked the Wood Memorial that was won by Rodriguez, and Grande finished second with his wide trip. How does Rodriguez work out a trip? What type of trip will he require to possibly spring an upset in the Kentucky Derby? Talking about Rodriguez.
I think if he tucks in behind, a 3 or 4-way duel and inherits once the bad speed collapses, I thought he finished very well in the Wood. I mean, this wasn't like a horse getting loose and then running sideways in the stretch. He ran all the way to the wire, and he ran in big numbers. So, if he gets one of those beautiful setups, he's good enough to win the race.
I agree with you. He's in my top 4, not in my top 3, but he's in my top 4. Rodriguez is. East Avenue, it's going to be tough to see him win the race. He was trying to fall down in the bluegrass, in my opinion. And Owen Almighty also probably does not belong in this field. Okay, it is time for our Derby selections, and we will do that right after this break.
Hi everyone, Gino Bacola here, and Derby Day is coming soon. Get DRF's Kentucky Derby package and play with confidence. Save up to 39% on expert picks, data, and betting strategies. Head to shop.drf.com now and get ready to win big.
Welcome back to the Sportsbook Draft, where FanDuel's pick is in.
With the first pick in the 2025 Sportsbook Draft, FanDuel selects the Kentucky Derby.
Brilliant pick, as FanDuel becomes the first sportsbook app where you can bet the Derby.
Just a savvy move by a savvy franchise. New customers get a no-sweat first bet on the Kentucky Derby up to $500.
It's like they know each other.
What do you think Rob's saying to him right now?
Probably something about oats.
We're back with the 2025 Kentucky Derby webinar presented by FanDuel. It's time to summarize our selections. Andy, I'm going to let you go first with your top 4 choices.
Well, I'm just, my bet on this Derby is going to be strictly a journalism Burnham Square exacta. I mean, if Baeza sneaks into the race, I'll have a little ticket with him. But I think journalism and Burnham Square have got really solid credentials, and I'll live or die with a cold exacta in a field of 20.
Cold exacta in a field of 20 ought to pay very well. Journalism over Burnham Square, Baeza and East Avenue, Andy Beyer's top 4 choices. Steve, you're going for the knockout right on top. Grande's listed 20-1. I think his odds are going to come down considerably. Talk to us about your top 4 choices.
Well, if journalism and Grand were the same price, I would pick journalism. I think he's a more likely winner of the race. He's proven, and Grand, who I'll call in deference to Andy, he's a little bit on the come. I think he will run an even better race, but he hasn't run that race yet. So I don't want to pick the race journalism over Grand and have Grand win and pay $40. I'd feel like an idiot. So I put Grand on top. Journalism, who I think is dead solid and should be on, everyone's ticket somewhere. Rodriguez, I think, at 12-1, I thought his wood was good. And I think there is a scenario for him to hang around at the end. And, Baeza, I have to include because he's extremely talented and he deserves to be in the race.
Steve Crist likes number 10, Grand over journalism, Rodriguez and Baeza. My top choice, I went for it with Baeza. I thought he ran super in the Santa Anita Derby. I think he has room to improve. He worked out 9 days after the Santa Anita Derby. Most trainers will wait 2 weeks before they work a horse out after a tough race. But Baeza was right back on the work tab. Trainer John Sheriffs has won the Kentucky Derby before. Flavian Pratt is scheduled to ride Baeza. I think he has a ton of upside. We know about his pedigree at half to Mage and Dornoch. I look for Baeza to run super if he gets into the field, and if he doesn't, it'd be a crying shame. And if he doesn't, then journalism will be my default selection. He has everything going for him. The only knock on journalism is his price. He's going to be the favorite, 5-2, 3-1 range, a little short for me, but I certainly respect his ability. Sandman is going to be coming from the clouds. He has an 8-start foundation of races, and he will relish the mile and 1/4. And then I'm kind of with Steve as far as Rodriguez goes. I see him as being kind of the long shot key to the potential, good paying trifecta or exacta. I think that Rodriguez, if he can be as effective, tucked in right behind the speed, I think he has a chance to outrun his price. But I'm going for Baeza on top. Andy likes journalism. Steve likes Grande. And that is a look at our top selections. Before we sign off, we're going to take some questions and answers from some of our viewers. And let's start off with Citizen Bull. This viewer wrote, I like Citizen Bull, but after the post draw, I'm considering tossing him. Your thoughts on post position 1 in the Derby? Andy, you answered this just a minute ago. Just reiterate your thoughts about speed in the rail.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with speed on the rail. It's been a good thing for the last 100 years. And, where else do you want Citizen Bull? I mean, I think that, being there, they're just going to have to go with them and get position, but nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that, especially at odds of 20-1. So for anybody out there who likes 20-1 on Citizen Bowl, I would not let the inside post scare you off of that price. I think he's up against it. I think the pace is going to be hot. Next question regards Final Gambit. How does Final Gambit get in over Baeza? Steve, you touched on this earlier. Some of the rules that with the point system probably need to be rectified before next year, because this would be a shame for a Jeff Ruby horse to get in over the San Antonio Derby runner-up. Agree?
Completely agree, and I really hope they just get rid of the rule for next year. It was a spiteful anti-California, anti-Baffert rule to begin with. It doesn't belong in the who gets to run in the Derby process.
I agree. Next question regards Flying Gambit. Does he have an upset chance? Well, he's in the starting gate, so he has a chance. I know there's been a lot of talk about how he's been training well over the Churchill Downs surface. I'm not sure how much many of those workouts he had dirt kicked in his face, because when these turf and synthetic horses get dirt kicked in their face for the first time, they often run backward. I know that a couple years ago, Two Phils came into the Kentucky Derby off a synthetic surface victory. However, Two Phils had already proven himself on dirt. So I think the Flying Gambit is up against it. He's a big price. I don't talk anybody off 30-1 shots. Okay, next question.
Well, I will just say that whenever I hate Flying Gambit too, but whenever I hate a Brad Cox horse, they invariably win in my face. So
well, he won the Dubai World Cup this spring with a horse that you could argue probably didn't belong in the race. So it wouldn't be the first time that Cox is spraying an upset. Okay, in lieu of the dosage factor and juvenile racing experience, what metrics? I don't like the term metrics, because I don't think there's anything. You can't blueprint handicapping these races. But what about pedigree and experience? Steve, how about you first?
Well, I'd have had a very different answer for you, 10 or even 20 years ago. So much of, what we grew up with and what the first, 120 years of the Derby suggested is so different, from what we see today of horses running in these races in their third, fourth, fifth career starts. I used to insist on bottom and that horses start early as juveniles and, all these things which held up very well for over a century. Now with this new kind of, risk-averse style of training and 5-horse campaigns and only 2 preps before the Derby, I don't think you can make a blueprint anymore and say you have to have run 7 times at 2. You have to have 3.5 preps. It's all gone out the window.
It's all gone out the window.
Let me just add something here. I agree with everything you say about the style of training and preparing horses, but I think that the weaknesses of the this very light, cautious training style is reflected by speed figures in the Derby. I mean, the Triple Crown races in the last 7 or 8 years, nobody runs more than like 102. And it's not that these horses aren't good. I mean, they're just not mature or fit enough, to run their best. I mean, last year I think the winning figure for the Derby, I guess it was 101. But by the end of the year, these same horses were like running 109. When they have the right amount of seasoning. So I don't see this light touch, as being a good thing for anybody.
Well, if Grande wins the Kentucky Derby in his 4th career start, he would join Mage and Justify, and we might have to twist Andy's arm a little bit next spring with regards to the seasoning that's required to win this race. Next question. Are we going to look back and say, wow, 3-1 on journalism was a gift? Look, there's an old cliche out there that every winner is an overlay, and I like to hear that cliche because I think it's absolutely absurd. Just because a horse wins does not mean he is an overlay. And if Journalism wins the Derby and pays $8, I'm going to say that he was an underlay in this race. I don't think he's a fair value bet at anything less than 5-1. And of course, his odds are going to be significantly lower than that. So no, I don't think there's any such thing as a gift after the race. Last question has to do with Grande. Or Grand, runner-up in the wood. Is he sneaky? No, he's not sneaky because, Steve, you picked him right on top. What price are you willing to accept on Grand in the Kentucky Derby to Steve?
Well, I don't think I'm getting 20, but I'll take anything in double digits.
Okay, double digits will be. He might get 10-1. Okay, don't forget about the FanDuel No Sweat First Bet promotion. You get up to $500 back if your bet misses. And just a quick reminder, Andy likes Journalism. Steve likes Grand. I like Baeza. And that's a wrap. For Andy Beyer and Steve Crist, I'm Brad Free. Thanks for watching and good luck Saturday in the Kentucky Derby.
With the first pick in the 2025 Sportsbook Draft, FanDuel selects the Kentucky Derby.
New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $500 on the Kentucky Derby with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.